In a quiet little town where the streets were lined with old brick buildings and the air always carried the faint smell of freshly baked bread, there was a small diner that had been around for decades. It wasn't fancy, just a cozy place with vinyl booths, checkered floors, and a jukebox in the corner that played songs from another era. The diner was called Maggie's Place, named after its original owner who had passed it down to her daughter years ago. Now it served as a hub for locals looking for a warm meal and some friendly conversation. Among the regulars at Maggie's Place was Sarah, a young woman in her late 20s who worked tirelessly as a waitress. She wasn't new to the job. She'd been working there since she was 18, balancing long shifts with night classes at the community college. Life hadn't been easy for Sarah. Her parents had struggled financially when she was growing up, and even now, she lived paycheck to paycheck in a tiny apartment above a laundromat. Despite all this, Sarah had a heart full of kindness. She smiled through every shift, no matter how tired or stressed she felt, because she believed people deserved a little warmth, even if it came in the form of a polite greeting or an extra refill of coffee. Every day brought something different to Maggie's Place. There were truck drivers stopping by on their routes, elderly couples sharing milkshakes, and teenagers sneaking fries when they thought no one was looking. But one thing remained constant: a young girl who sat alone at the same booth near the window almost every afternoon. Sarah first noticed her about 3 months ago. At first glance, she didn't seem out of place. She looked like any other kid you might see wandering around town, except for the fact that she rarely ordered anything more than water or occasionally a plain slice of toast. The girl couldn't have been older than 12 or 13. Her clothes were worn and mismatched, and her sneakers were scuffed as though they'd seen better days. Yet, despite her ragged appearance, there was something hauntingly beautiful about her face. Her big brown eyes held a mix of curiosity and sadness, as if she were carrying secrets too heavy for someone so young. Every time Sarah approached her table to take her order, or lack thereof, the girl would give her a shy smile, mumble a soft "thank you," and then return to staring out the window. At first, Sarah didn't think much of it. Maybe the girl was waiting for her mom or dad to pick her up after school. Or perhaps she just liked sitting by the window, watching the world go by. But as the weeks went by, Sarah began to notice patterns. The girl always came in around lunchtime, when the diner was busiest, making it easier for her to blend into the crowd without drawing attention. She never stayed for more than an hour, but during that time she barely touched her food, if she ordered at all. Instead, she seemed content to sit quietly, lost in thought, as though she were waiting for something or someone that never arrived. Sarah's instincts told her something wasn't right. She'd seen enough hardship in her own life to recognize signs of struggle in others. One particularly cold winter afternoon, the sight of the girl shivering in her thin jacket broke Sarah's heart. Without thinking twice, she grabbed a chocolate muffin from the display case and placed it on the girl's table, along with a steaming cup of hot cocoa. "On the house," she said softly, giving her a reassuring smile before walking away quickly. For a moment, the girl looked startled, as if unsure whether to accept the gesture. Then slowly she reached for the mug, wrapping her small hands around it to soak up its warmth. When Sarah glanced back a few minutes later, the muffin was half-eaten, and the girl's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. That tiny expression of gratitude spoke volumes to Sarah. From that day forward, helping the girl became their unspoken routine. Sometimes, Sarah would slip a sandwich onto her table when no one was looking. Other times, she'd bring over a bowl of soup, claiming it was left over from the kitchen and needed to be eaten before closing time. Each act of kindness was subtle, designed not to embarrass the girl, but to let her know she wasn't invisible. And though they exchanged few words beyond polite nods and murmured thanks, a bond began to form between them, a silent understanding that transcended language. As the weeks turned into months, Sarah found herself thinking about the girl even when she wasn't at work. Who was she? Where did she come from? Why did she spend so much time alone? These questions lingered in Sarah's mind, gnawing at her conscience. Still, she hesitated to ask directly. Something about the girl's demeanor suggested she wasn't ready to share her story. Not yet, anyway. So Sarah continued doing what she could, trusting that her small acts of kindness might make a difference, even if she didn't fully understand the bigger picture. Little did Sarah know, her compassion was about to set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. For now, however, the diner remained their shared sanctuary, a place where two strangers connected through simple, unspoken gestures of humanity. Sarah's routine at Maggie's place continued as usual, but the presence of the mysterious girl began to weigh more heavily on her thoughts. Each day, she found herself looking forward to those brief moments when their paths crossed. The girl, whose name Sarah still didn't know, had become a quiet fixture in her life, like the ticking clock on the diner wall or the whirring sound of the milkshake machine. Yet, unlike those mundane details, there was something about the girl that felt profoundly significant, though Sarah couldn't quite put it into words. One particularly busy afternoon, the diner buzzed with activity. A group of construction workers occupied one side of the room, their laughter echoing loudly as they shared stories over burgers and fries. On the other side sat a couple celebrating what appeared to be an anniversary, judging by the candlelit cupcake they ordered alongside their coffee. Amidst the chaos, Sarah moved swiftly between tables, balancing trays laden with plates and glasses. Despite the hectic pace, her eyes kept drifting toward the corner booth near the window, the girl's usual spot. When she finally approached the table, Sarah noticed something different. The girl wasn't staring out the window as she normally did. Instead, she was hunched over, clutching her stomach and grimacing slightly. Concern washed over Sarah immediately. "Are you okay?" she asked softly, leaning closer so only the girl could hear. The girl hesitated before nodding weakly. "I'm fine," she murmured, avoiding eye contact. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She glanced around quickly to ensure no one was paying attention, then slipped a small plate of scrambled eggs onto the table. "Eat this," she urged gently. "You'll feel better." For a moment the girl looked conflicted, as if debating whether to accept the food. Hunger eventually won out, and she began eating slowly, her movements cautious. Sarah lingered nearby, pretending to wipe down an already clean table, while keeping a watchful eye on her. It wasn't until the girl finished the last bite that Sarah allowed herself to relax slightly. Over time, Sarah started noticing other subtle signs of distress. The girl's clothes seemed thinner, her cheeks hollowed ever so slightly, and her once bright eyes grew duller with each passing week. These changes gnawed at Sarah's conscience. She wanted to help more, but she knew she had to tread carefully. If the girl truly was in trouble, and Sarah suspected she was, forcing her hand might do more harm than good. Then came the day when everything shifted. It was late in the evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the diner floor. Most of the customers had left, leaving only a few stragglers nursing cups of coffee. Sarah was clearing dishes from an empty booth when she heard a commotion outside. Curious, she walked to the window and peered out. A sleek, black car pulled up to the curb, its polished surface gleaming under the streetlights. Out stepped a tall man dressed in an expensive suit, his confident stride and commanding presence immediately drawing attention. He entered the diner moments later, shaking, droplets of rain from his umbrella. His sharp blue eyes scanned the room before landing on Sarah, who froze mid-step, unsure why she suddenly felt so uneasy. "Good evening," he said smoothly, his voice carrying a tone of authority that made Sarah instinctively straighten her posture. "I'd like a table, please." She nodded and led him to a seat near the counter. As she handed him a menu, their eyes met briefly and Sarah felt a strange sense of recognition, as if they'd crossed paths somewhere before, though she couldn't recall where. The man ordered black coffee and scrambled eggs, which struck Sarah as oddly specific given the variety of options available. Still, she jotted it down without comment and returned to the kitchen. What happened next surprised her even more. Instead of focusing solely on his meal, the man began observing the diner with keen interest. He watched the interactions between customers, studied the staff as they worked, and occasionally glanced toward the corner booth where the girl sometimes sat. When Sarah delivered his order, He thanked her warmly and added, "You seem very attentive. Have you worked here long?" Caught off guard by the question, Sarah stammered, Yeah, almost 10 years now." He nodded thoughtfully, taking a sip of his coffee. "It shows. You have a way of making people feel cared for. That's rare these days." His words left Sarah feeling both flattered and unsettled. Who was this man, and why was he paying such close attention to her? Over the next few weeks, he became a regular visitor, always choosing the same seat and ordering the same meal. With each visit, he engaged Sarah in casual conversation, asking about her background, her dreams, and how she managed to stay so positive despite the challenges of her job. At first, Sarah dismissed his curiosity as mere politeness. After all, wealthy patrons often like to chat with waitstaff. It gave them a sense of connection to the real world, as she'd heard someone joke once. But as the visits continued, Sarah realized there was more to him than met the eye. His questions weren't superficial, they were thoughtful, probing even, and every time he complimented her kindness or work ethic, she felt a flicker of unease, as though he were piecing together a puzzle she didn't fully understand. One evening, as Sarah cleared his table after closing time, the man introduced himself properly. "My name is Jonathan," he said, extending a hand, "and I must admit I've been watching you closely these past few weeks." Sarah blinked in surprise. "Watching me? Why?" Jonathan smiled faintly, his expression softening. "Because you remind me of someone I used to know, someone who believed in helping others even when it cost them personally. Your actions speak volumes, Sarah, especially toward that young girl who sits in the corner booth." Her heart skipped a beat. Had he noticed her secret efforts to care for the girl? Was he judging her for stepping outside the boundaries of her role as a waitress? Before she could respond, Jonathan added, "Don't worry, I mean no harm. In fact, I think what you're doing is remarkable. People like you are the reason I do what I do." Confused, Sarah tilted her head. "What exactly is it that you do?" Jonathan leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "Let's just say, I have resources that can make a difference in situations like this. Situations where someone is struggling silently, waiting for someone to notice. Someone like you has already taken the first step. Let me take the next." Though his words intrigued her, Sarah remained cautious. How could she trust a stranger, even one as seemingly genuine as Jonathan, with something so delicate? Yet deep down, she couldn't deny the hope his offer sparked within her. Perhaps, just perhaps, he really could help the girl whose story remained shrouded in mystery. As Sarah locked up the diner that night, her mind raced with possibilities. For months, she had carried the weight of wondering what lay behind the girl's sad eyes. Now, for the first time, she dared to imagine a future where answers and solutions might finally come to light. The days that followed Jonathan's revelation were a whirlwind of emotions for Sarah. On one hand, she felt a flicker of hope, a possibility that the girl's struggles might finally come to an end. On the other hand, doubt gnawed at her relentlessly. Who was this man, really? Could she trust him with something so delicate? And even if his intentions were pure, what could he possibly do to help? Despite her reservations, Sarah found herself paying closer attention to Jonathan during his visits. He wasn't like the other wealthy patrons who came into Maggie's place. Those customers often treated the diner as a novelty, a quaint little stop on their way to somewhere more important. But Jonathan was different. He didn't just observe, he listened. He noticed things most people overlooked. The way Sarah greeted every customer with genuine warmth, how she remembered regulars' orders without being asked, and especially the subtle ways she cared for the girl in the corner booth. One rainy Tuesday evening, the diner was unusually quiet. The weather had kept many customers away, leaving only a handful scattered throughout the room. Sarah moved between tables, refilling coffee cups and tidying up napkin dispensers. Her thoughts drifted to the girl who hadn't shown up in 2 days longer than usual. She wondered if everything was all right or if something worse had happened. Just as she was about to check the time again, the bell above the door jingled, signaling a new arrival. It was Jonathan, accompanied by two men in dark suits. Their polished shoes clicked against the tiled floor as they entered, drawing immediate attention from the few remaining customers. Sarah froze behind the counter, gripping the edge of a tray tightly. Something about their presence felt off. Jonathan approached her calmly, his expression unreadable. "Sarah," he began, his voice low but firm. "These gentlemen are with me. We need your help." Her pulse quickened. "My help? With what?" Before he could answer, the two men stepped aside, revealing a patrol car parked outside. Through the rain-streaked windows, Sarah saw a figure sitting in the back seat, a small huddled form wrapped in a blanket. Her breath caught in her throat when she recognized the girl. It was her, the same girl who had sat silently in the corner booth for months, waiting and watching. "What's going on?" Sarah demanded, her voice trembling. "Is she okay?" One of the officers stepped forward, his demeanor calm but authoritative. "We're here to identify her," he explained. "She's been missing for nearly 6 months. Her parents have been searching everywhere." Sarah's knees went weak. Missing? Parents? The pieces began falling into place, but the weight of it all threatened to overwhelm her. Had she unknowingly been helping a child who had run away from home? Was she somehow responsible for keeping her hidden? The questions swirled in her mind, each one heavier than the last. "We traced her movements to this area," the officer continued, "and we believe you may have interacted with her. Do you recognize her?" Sarah nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "She comes in sometimes. She sits in the corner booth. I thought she was just alone." Jonathan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You did nothing wrong, Sarah. In fact, you've done far more than anyone else might have in your position. Without realizing it, you've kept her safe." Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. As the officers escorted her outside to speak with the girl, Sarah couldn't shake the guilt gnawing at her heart. What if she hadn't helped her? What if the girl had ended up somewhere worse because Sarah hadn't done enough? Inside the patrol car, the girl, now identified as Emily, looked up at Sarah with wide, tear-filled eyes. For the first time, Sarah saw fear mingled with gratitude in her expression. "Thank you," Emily murmured, her voice barely audible over the sound of the rain. Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she knelt beside the car. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "I didn't know." Emily shook her head slightly. "You saved me," she said simply, clutching a stuffed bunny to her chest. "You made me feel like someone cared." The words hit Sarah like a tidal wave. All those months of sneaking food and offering quiet kindness had meant something, not just to her but to Emily too. It was a humbling realization, one that filled her with both pride and sorrow. Pride that she had made a difference, however small, and sorrow that she hadn't been able to do more. As the officers prepared to take Emily to the station to reunite her with her family, Jonathan stayed by Sarah's side. "This isn't the end," he told her firmly. "It's only the beginning." Confused, Sarah turned to him. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly, his piercing blue eyes locking onto hers. "You reminded me why I started my work in the first place. People like you restore faith in humanity. And now, I want to give you the tools to help others like Emily." Over the next few days, Sarah learned more about Emily's story. Her parents had recently divorced, and the separation had left Emily feeling lost and abandoned. One night, unable to cope with the tension at home, she had packed a small bag and run away. For months, she had wandered the streets, surviving on scraps and sleeping wherever she could find shelter. The diner had become her refuge, a place where she felt safe, even if only for a short while. Meanwhile, Jonathan revealed more about himself. He was a billionaire philanthropist who had dedicated his life to helping vulnerable children and families. His foundation provided resources for missing persons cases, foster care reform, and educational programs for at-risk youth. Witnessing Sarah's selflessness had reignited his passion for grassroots efforts, acts of kindness performed by ordinary people making extraordinary impacts. "Join us," Jonathan urged during one of their conversations, not as a waitress, but as someone who understands the value of compassion. You could be the bridge between people like Emily and the resources they desperately need. At first, Sarah hesitated. She had spent years working at Maggie's place, carving out a modest but stable life for herself. Leaving that behind felt daunting, almost impossible. But as she thought about Emily and all the other Emilys out there who needed help, she realized she couldn't turn away. This was her chance to make a bigger difference, to channel her kindness into something greater. With a mix of excitement and trepidation, Sarah accepted Jonathan's offer. Within weeks, she began training with his team, learning about advocacy, outreach, and the systemic issues affecting vulnerable populations. It was overwhelming at times, but also deeply fulfilling. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Months later, Sarah stood outside the newly renovated community center funded by Jonathan's foundation. Inside, volunteers bustled about, preparing for its grand opening. Among them was Emily, now reunited with her family and thriving under their care. She waved enthusiastically when she spotted Sarah, running over to hug her tightly. "I'll never forget what you did for me," Emily said, her voice brimming with emotion. "You changed my life." Sarah smiled through tears, ruffling the girl's hair affectionately. "No, sweetheart. You changed mine." As she watched Emily return to her parents, laughing and smiling like any normal teenager, Sarah felt a profound sense of peace. Her journey had been unexpected, unpredictable, and at times painful, but it had led her here, to a place where she could truly make a difference. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly have challenges, she knew one thing. For certain, kindness, no matter how small, always mattered. Sarah's life had changed dramatically since the day Emily was found. The quiet, predictable rhythm of her days at Maggie's place was replaced by a whirlwind of new experiences and responsibilities. Working with Jonathan's foundation opened doors she never imagined existed. She attended workshops, met inspiring individuals, and learned about the complex web of challenges facing vulnerable children and families. Yet, despite the excitement, there were moments when doubt crept in, moments when she wondered if she was truly cut out for this kind of work. Her first major assignment came just weeks after joining the team. Jonathan tasked her with organizing a community outreach event aimed at raising awareness about missing children and providing resources for struggling families. It was a daunting project, especially for someone who had spent most of her adult life taking orders and serving meals. But Sarah approached it with the same determination that had driven her to help Emily in secret. The planning process tested every ounce of her patience and creativity. She worked long hours, often staying up late into the night, drafting flyers, coordinating volunteers, and securing donations from local businesses. At times, frustration bubbled over. "Why does everything have to be so complicated?" she muttered one evening, staring at a stack of papers on her kitchen table. But then, she remembered Emily, the scared, lonely girl who had sat silently in the corner booth, and the thought fueled her resolve. If even one child could find hope because of what she was doing, it would all be worth it. On the day of the event, Sarah arrived early at the community center, her heart pounding with anticipation. Volunteers scurried around, setting up tables, arranging chairs and hanging banners. Outside, a small crowd began to gather, curious about the buzz of activity. As the clock ticked closer to the start time, Sarah took a deep breath and reminded herself why she was here, to make a difference, no matter how small. When Jonathan arrived, he immediately sought her out. "You've done an incredible job," he said, his tone filled with genuine admiration. "This is going to change lives." His words gave her a boost of confidence, but the real turning point came later that afternoon. A mother approached Sarah, tears streaming down her face, clutching a photograph of a smiling boy. She explained that her son had gone missing 6 months ago. "I don't know what else to do," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I feel like I'm losing my mind." Sarah listened intently, offering comfort and guidance. She connected the woman with a counselor from the foundation and promised to follow up personally. Watching the gratitude in the mother's eyes reignited Sarah's sense of purpose. This was why she was here, not for accolades or recognition, but to provide support and hope to those who needed it most. As the event unfolded, stories poured in from people across the community. Some shared tales of loss and heartbreak, while others expressed relief at finding resources they hadn't known existed. By the end of the day, dozens of families had signed up for counseling services, legal aid, and educational programs offered by the foundation. For Sarah, it was proof that even the smallest efforts could create ripples of change. In the weeks that followed, Sarah threw herself into her new role with renewed energy. Her days were no longer confined to the diner. Instead, she traveled throughout the region, visiting schools, shelters, and community centers. She spoke passionately about the importance of kindness, resilience, and action. Her own story became a powerful tool, one that resonated deeply with audiences. One chilly autumn morning, Sarah stood before a group of high school students recounting her experience with Emily. "Sometimes we think we can't make a difference because we're not rich or famous," she told them, her voice steady yet warm. "But you don't need money or power to help someone. All you need is compassion and the courage to act on it." The room fell silent as the students absorbed her words. Afterward, several approached her, eager to share their own struggles or ask how they could get involved. One boy, barely 16, handed her a crumpled note. "Thank you for telling your story," it read. "It made me realize I'm not alone." Moments like these reminded Sarah of why she had taken this leap of faith. Every person she touched, every life she impacted, brought her closer to understanding the true meaning of purpose. While Sarah thrived in her new role, Jonathan continued to play a pivotal part in her journey. He wasn't just a mentor, he was a constant source of encouragement and wisdom. Whenever doubts surfaced, he reminded her of her strengths. "You see things others miss," he once told her. "That's a gift. Not everyone has it." Their partnership extended beyond professional boundaries. Over time, they developed a deep friendship built on mutual respect and shared values. Jonathan admired Sarah's unwavering empathy, while Sarah appreciated his vision and commitment to creating lasting change. Together, they envisioned bold initiatives designed to address systemic issues affecting vulnerable populations. One such project involved transforming abandoned buildings into safe spaces for homeless youth. Another focused on providing scholarships for children from low-income families. Each idea stemmed from conversations sparked by Sarah's first-hand experiences and insights. Yet amidst the success and growth, Sarah never forgot her roots. She visited Maggie's place regularly, catching up with co-workers and customers who had become like family. The diner remained a symbol of where her journey began, a reminder of the simple acts of kindness that had set everything in motion. By the end of her first year with the foundation, Sarah had achieved more than she ever thought possible. Her efforts earned recognition not only within the organization, but also in the broader community. Local newspapers featured her story, highlighting her transition from waitress to advocate. Friends and acquaintances reached out, inspired by her transformation and eager to contribute in their own ways. Despite the accolades, Sarah stayed grounded. She knew the work was far from over. There were still countless children like Emily, waiting for someone to notice them, to care enough to step in, and though the road ahead would undoubtedly present challenges, she faced it with optimism and determination. Late one evening, as she sat in her cozy apartment reviewing plans for an upcoming initiative, Sarah reflected on how far she'd come. From quietly slipping food to a lonely girl in a diner, to standing on stages and speaking to crowds, her journey had been anything but ordinary. But through it all, one truth remained constant. Kindness, no matter how small, always mattered. And as she drifted off to sleep that night, she smiled, knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be, helping others find light in their darkest moments. Sarah's journey with the foundation continued to evolve, and each passing month brought new challenges and triumphs. Her role expanded beyond organizing events and outreach programs. She became a voice for the voiceless, advocating for policies that addressed systemic issues affecting vulnerable children and families. It was a daunting responsibility, but Sarah embraced it wholeheartedly, driven by the belief that even the smallest actions could spark meaningful change. One of her most ambitious projects involved launching a mentorship program aimed at connecting at-risk youth with positive role models. The idea came to her after hearing countless stories from teenagers who felt abandoned or misunderstood. Many of them had dreams they thought were impossible to achieve, burdened by circumstances beyond their control. Sarah wanted to show them that their futures weren't predetermined, that with guidance and support, they could overcome obstacles and build better lives. The planning phase was intense. Sarah spent hours meeting with educators, social workers, and community leaders to design a curriculum that would empower participants while addressing their unique needs. She also recruited volunteers, including some of Jonathan's influential contacts, to serve as mentors. Among them was a retired teacher named Margaret, whose wisdom and patience proved invaluable, and a young entrepreneur who shared his journey of rising from poverty to success. When the program officially launched, Sarah stood nervously at the front of a packed room, watching as pairs of mentors and mentees introduced themselves. There were shy smiles, awkward handshakes, and tentative conversations, all signs of connections beginning to form. As the weeks went by, those initial hesitations gave way to genuine bonds. Mentors and mentees met regularly, sharing meals, playing sports, or simply talking about life. For many of the kids, it was the first time they'd felt truly seen and heard. One particular story stood out to Sarah. A teenage boy named Marcus, who had grown up in foster care, struggled with anger issues and often acted out in school. His mentor, a former military officer turned counselor, worked tirelessly to earn his trust. At first, Marcus resisted, dismissing the man's efforts as pointless. But over time, he began opening up, sharing bits and pieces of his pain and frustration. By the end of the 6-month program, Marcus had not only improved academically, but also discovered a passion for photography, thanks to his mentor's encouragement. Seeing Marcus beam with pride during the program's closing ceremony brought tears to Sarah's eyes. As Sarah's reputation grew, so did the demands on her time. Requests for speaking engagements poured in from schools, nonprofits, and conferences across the country. Each invitation presented an opportunity to spread her message of hope and resilience, but it also meant stepping out of her comfort zone. Public speaking had never been her strong suit, yet she pushed through her nerves, knowing how important her words could be. At one such event, held in a large auditorium filled with hundreds of attendees, Sarah recounted her own struggles and the lessons she'd learned along the way. "I used to think I wasn't special," she admitted, her voice steady despite the weight of emotion behind her words. "I thought my job as a waitress defined me, who I was and what I could accomplish. But then I realized something. Every single one of us has the power to make a difference. It doesn't matter where you come from or what you do for a living. What matters is how you treat others." Her speech resonated deeply with the audience. Afterward, dozens of people lined up to thank her, sharing their own stories of hardship and perseverance. One woman, a single mother raising 3 children on her own, hugged Sarah tightly. "You've given me hope," she said, her voice trembling. "Hope that I can keep going no matter how hard things get." These moments reminded Sarah why she had chosen this path. Every person she touched carried their own battles, and sometimes all they needed was someone to believe in them, to remind them that they weren't alone. Despite her growing confidence, Sarah faced setbacks too. Not every project succeeded, and not every story ended happily. Some mentors dropped out midway through the program, leaving their mentees feeling rejected. Others struggled to connect, unable to bridge the gap between their worlds. And then, there were the heartbreaking cases, the ones where Sarah couldn't intervene quickly enough to prevent tragedy. One such case involved a young girl named Lily, who reminded Sarah painfully of Emily. Like Emily, Lily had run away from home, seeking refuge from a toxic environment. Unlike Emily, however, Lily hadn't found a safe haven like Maggie's place. By the time Sarah and her team located her, it was too late. Lily had fallen victim to exploitation, her innocence stolen in ways that left permanent scars. The loss hit Sarah hard. For days she questioned whether she was doing enough, whether any of her efforts truly mattered in the face of such overwhelming need. Jonathan noticed her withdrawal and invited her to dinner one evening, sensing she needed to talk. "You're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," he said gently as they sat in a quiet cafe. "But you can't save everyone. Sarah, that's not your job." "I know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it still hurts, knowing we couldn't reach her in time." Jonathan nodded sympathetically. "It's okay to hurt. It means you care. But don't let it break you. Use it to fuel your fire, to keep fighting for those you can help." His words stayed with her long after their meal ended. Slowly, Sarah began to heal, channeling her grief into action. She doubled down on her efforts, determined to honor Lily's memory by ensuring others didn't suffer the same fate. Amidst the highs and lows, Sarah found solace in unexpected places. Her friendship with Jonathan deepened, becoming a source of strength and inspiration. They spent countless evenings discussing ideas, strategizing solutions, and reflecting on the impact of their work. Though neither of them acknowledged it openly, there was an undeniable connection between them, a mutual admiration that transcended professional boundaries. Their bond reached a turning point during a charity gala hosted by Jonathan's foundation. Dressed in a simple yet elegant gown, Sarah stood beside him as he delivered a heartfelt speech about the organization's achievements. Midway through, he paused and turned to her, his expression softening. "None of this would have been possible without Sarah," he said, drawing applause from the crowd. "She reminds us that kindness isn't just an act, it's a way of life. And because of her, we've been able to touch countless lives." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she accepted the spotlight reluctantly. She had never sought recognition, but seeing the joy and gratitude on people's faces made her realize the collective power of their efforts. Together, they were creating ripples of change, ripples that would continue spreading long after the night ended. By the end of the year, Sarah's transformation was undeniable. From the quiet waitress slipping food to a lonely girl in a diner, to the confident advocate standing on stages and inspiring crowds, she had come a long way. Yet, at her core, she remained the same compassionate soul who believed in the goodness of humanity. As she prepared for another day of work, Sarah glanced at a framed photo on her desk, a picture of her and Emily taken at the community center months earlier. In it, Emily smiled brightly, radiating happiness and hope. Sarah smiled back at the image, reminded once again of the ripple effect of kindness. No matter where life took her next, one thing was certain. She would always strive to make a difference, one small act of compassion at a time. Years had passed since Sarah's journey began in the cozy confines of Maggie's place, but the impact of her actions continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond what she could have imagined. Her transformation from a waitress quietly, helping a lonely girl to a respected advocate for vulnerable children and families, was nothing short of remarkable. Yet despite all the accolades and achievements, Sarah remained grounded in her belief that kindness, no matter how small, always mattered. The foundation Jonathan had built grew exponentially under their combined leadership. What started as a local initiative expanded into a nationwide movement, attracting support from influential figures, corporations, and everyday citizens eager to contribute. Sarah became its face, a symbol of hope and resilience. She traveled across cities, sharing her story at conferences, schools, and community events. Each speech reinforced her message. Anyone could make a difference if they chose to care. One evening, Sarah stood on stage at a grand gala hosted by the foundation. The room sparkled with chandeliers, elegant gowns, and tailored suits. Yet the atmosphere buzzed with something deeper than glamour. It was filled with stories of survival, triumph, and gratitude. Beside her sat Emily, now a bright-eyed teenager brimming with confidence. Gone were the days when she huddled silently in the corner booth, clutching a stuffed bunny for comfort. Tonight she radiated joy, ready to share her story with hundreds of people. As Sarah introduced Emily, the audience fell silent, hanging on to every word. "When I first met Emily," Sarah began, her voice steady but warm, "she was just a scared little girl trying to survive. But look at her now, strong, brave, and full of dreams." Emily stepped forward, gripping the microphone tightly. For a moment she hesitated, glancing back at Sarah for reassurance. Then, taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "I used to think no one cared about me," she said softly, her voice gaining strength with each sentence. "But then I found Maggie's place and Sarah. She didn't know me, but she still helped me. She gave me food when I was hungry and hope when I felt lost. Because of her, I'm here today. And because of this foundation, so many others like me have been given a second chance." The crowd erupted into applause, moved by Emily's courage and sincerity. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she watched the young woman who had once been so fragile now standing tall, inspiring others with her resilience. This was why she had dedicated her life to this work, not for recognition, but for moments like these, where healing and transformation became visible. After the gala, Sarah took a rare moment to reflect on how much had changed. Her tiny apartment above the laundromat had been replaced by a modest home near the community center she helped establish. The diner where it all began still thrived, though Sarah visited less frequently now. When she did, the staff greeted her, warmly, teasing her about her newfound fame while reminiscing about old times. Maggie herself, now retired, often joined Sarah for coffee during these visits. "You've come a long way, kiddo," Maggie would say with a proud smile. "Never thought you'd leave my little diner to change the world." Sarah always laughed at that. "I didn't change the world, Maggie. I just tried to help a few people along the way." But Maggie wasn't wrong. Through Sarah's efforts, countless lives had been transformed. Families reunited, children found safe homes, and communities rallied together to support one another. The mentorship program she launched had grown into a nationwide network, pairing thousands of at-risk youth with caring adults who believed in them. Schools adopted curriculums designed to foster empathy and resilience, inspired by workshops Sarah conducted. Even businesses got involved, offering internships and scholarships to kids who otherwise might have slipped through the cracks. Yet, amidst all the success, Sarah never forgot the lessons she learned along the way. Kindness wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping reforms. It was about showing up day after day even when it felt insignificant. It was about listening without judgment, giving without expecting anything in return, and believing in people when they couldn't believe in themselves. Jonathan remained a constant presence in her life, both personally and professionally. Their partnership blossomed into something deeper over time, rooted in mutual respect and shared values. Though neither of them rushed into anything, their connection grew stronger with each passing year. They spent weekends volunteering together, brainstorming ideas for new projects or simply enjoying quiet dinners where they could unwind from the demands of their busy lives. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they walked through a park hand in hand, Jonathan stopped suddenly and turned to face her. "Sarah," he began, his tone unusually serious, "there's something I need to ask you." Her heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a simple yet elegant ring. "You've taught me so much about what truly matters in life," he said, his blue eyes shining with emotion. "And I can't imagine spending the rest of mine without you by my side. Will you marry me?" For a moment, Sarah was speechless. Then, tears streaming down her cheeks, she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, throwing her arms around him. "Of course, yes." Their wedding, held months later, was intimate and heartfelt. Friends, family, and colleagues gathered to celebrate not only their union, but also the love and compassion they embodied. Emily served as the flower girl, beaming with pride as she walked down the aisle ahead of Sarah. During the reception, Jonathan raised a toast to his bride, calling her the heart and soul of everything we've built together. Sarah responded by thanking everyone who had supported her journey, reminding them that none of it would have been possible without collective effort. In the years that followed, Sarah and Jonathan continued their work, expanding the foundation's reach globally, They opened centers in underserved regions, providing resources and education to communities in need. Sarah traveled extensively, learning from different cultures and adapting strategies to suit unique challenges. Along the way, she inspired countless individuals to join the cause, proving that kindness transcended borders and languages. Through it all, she stayed true to herself, humble, empathetic, and determined. Whether addressing world leaders at Diao international summits or comforting a child in distress, Sarah approached every interaction with the same level of care and authenticity. Her legacy wasn't defined by awards or headlines, but by the lives she touched and the hope she instilled in others. On a quiet spring morning years later, Sarah stood outside the community center named in her honor. Children played happily in the courtyard, their laughter echoing through the air. Parents chatted nearby, grateful for the safe space where their kids could grow and thrive. As she watched them, Sarah felt an overwhelming sense of peace. A young girl approached her, holding out a drawing. "This is for you," she said shyly, handing over the colorful picture of a smiling woman surrounded by children. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she knelt down to thank the girl. "It's beautiful," she said softly. "Thank you." That moment, Sarah realized her journey had come full circle. From secretly slipping food to a lonely girl in a diner to becoming a beacon of hope for thousands, she had stayed true to her purpose. And though the road ahead would undoubtedly bring new challenges, she faced it with unwavering optimism, knowing that even the smallest acts of kindness could create waves of change. As she walked away, hand in hand with Jonathan, Sarah smiled, content in the knowledge that she had done exactly what she was meant to do: help others find light in their darkest moments.